Jerry. Hey, they're doing some upgrades here, huh? We're doing some upgrades in the hallways, huh?
I've lived here since the building was new 26 years.
Wow, it's nice. Great location. Long time no see. Good to see you again.
Yeah. Did you bring the crowd with you?
I don't think they need any help these days, right? The corporations will fill the house. Hey, Miss Kitty. Oh, wow. What a view. So you've been here 26 years. Same apartment?
Same apartment.
Same great
I'm
view?
the only one who lived in this apartment.
Wow.
And it's amazing what I've seen. The school wasn't here. I see my toy train.
Yeah. Oh my
At
God.
one time, that toy train actually ran for about 2 blocks that way and 2 blocks this way. Now there's a 40-story building over there.
Oh yeah.
If you want to rent a penthouse, it's only $25,000 a month.
Oh God.
That's including a pool.
Well, that's good.
And I watch, this is my skybox, I do watch some softball games when they play in the summertime here.
Oh yeah.
But at one time, when I first moved in, the merchandise mart, in fact,
So this is Peyton then here.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, nice.
what they do with those. One time,
My daughter went to Northside, so they were sort of rivals.
when I first moved in, the merchandise mart was completely seen. There's nothing from the mart that I can see anymore. But I had to pull my shades down at night because the lights from the mart were so bright it lit up my room.
Oh.
So,
So you can't see it anymore.
No, but
Huh.
it's I've documented most of this for quite a while. It's absolutely amazing how you can find peace just looking out your window.
Yeah.
I see the storms, I see the snow, I see long summer nights, and it's really been great for me.
It really is, and how?
I'm not going to tell you how cheap I pay the rent, but it's cheap.
Well, in New York they have rent control, so you're entitled.
But,
Beautiful.
so you become a cameraman, huh?
Well, I'm going to give this a shot. I'm going to interview interesting Chicagoans, and you were one of the first on my list. So,
Huh. Appreciate that. Usually it's first to. Never mind. But I'm ready. If sit down and
Yeah, sure.
kind of discuss some things. But it is amazing that how I got involved with the Cubs in '45 when I was 8 years old.
Well, there was a story behind that, right? There was something you'd mentioned that you had mentioned to your father that you
Right.
wanted to see the Cubs in the World Series.
Right.
And he said, well, maybe next time, and you've had to
Right.
wait.
And that's exactly how it went. But the thing is, during the mid-40s, my brother and I used to clean up after the ball game and get a free ticket to the next game.
Okay,
We always planned to do it when there was a doubleheader the next day.
nice.
And that way, and we would never tell my father because he would leave us $1 apiece, which was enough money to go to a doubleheader, buy a hot dog or two, and come back and still have change. But that's a long time ago.
So when did they stop doing that? I was curious about that. That went on for into the 50s and 60s, right? Where they would allow kids to come in and clean up, and then they give them a ticket.
I would believe it at least went to the mid-50s at
Okay.
least. But as baseball expanded, they thought of ways of making money rather than bringing people into the ballpark and have a good time.
Sure.
I must have gone, my brother and I go to 20 games a year, double headers.
No more.
And we how do you put it? in '45 they were a pennant winner.
Right.
And I can tell you, Cavaretta 44 is first. Don Johnson at second base, number 20. Billy Jervis, shortstop 45. 6, Sam Hack at third. 43, Nicholson and Wright. Andy Pasco 48. And
Wow.
I'll claim a senior moment for Peanut Flory.
Wow, that's great.
But a lot of people when I first started showing up at a game had no idea that I had the history, and I did go to those games. And in fact, I saw my first television image in 1946, coming home from school. It was in a window at a record shop that was just turning into a television shop. And the first television in our neighborhood, and most neighborhoods in Chicago, was in taverns. So I started sneaking into the neighborhood tavern to watch Cubs games.
Wow.
And someone told my father. And my father went out and bought the first television in Albany Park that was not in a tavern to keep me from going to the bars.
You didn't plan it, but it worked out, right?
It's amazing. I saw WGN go on the air. And I don't have a photographic memory by any means, but something will trigger something to remind me, and it's amazing how many historic games I've been to or met some of my idols of baseball and get to talk to them. My sister got married on April 30th, 1948, and my brother and I were watching television, waiting for everybody to get ready to go for the big shindig. And that was a game. Did you ever see the play Bleacher Bumps?
Yes, I saw the TV version of it.
Okay,
I never saw it.
They mentioned this in the play, the Bleacher Bumps, where there was a home run inside of Andy Pasco's glove. That was April 30th. And my brother and I seen it. Well, there was no such thing as videotape in those days, and the screen was very small. So when the ball went out there, you really didn't see it. But I got to see that. And when I told Andy Pasco that...
You saw that on television?
Huh?
Was that in television?
Yes,
you saw that?
Okay. On WGN.
Okay.
And that was early in the season. And, he was amazed. And he says, I caught that thing. But, to meet so many stars in my lifetime, traveling to the ballpark, and my 25 years I lived in San Francisco. I don't know.
Well, no, that's one thing I want to ask you. When you were going into bars in Albany Park, well, we're going to go back, but I just want to touch on, how old were you when you were going into bars to watch baseball games? You must have been about 8 or 9 or...
8 years old.
8 years old, you were going into bars. Were you by yourself going into bars?
I sat on the footrail and looked up at the 10-inch television set.
Oh.
And no one ever said anything or kicked me out or whatever. So I used to go.
And how did you know to do that?
Because the signs on the taverns in those days said, watch the
Oh my gosh.
and whatever. And that was strictly black and white television. And I remember I started watching the Blackhawk games during the winter, and they would say, over the blue line. Well, I knew that line on television looked black, but I said, that's blue. So, in my mind, I had always imagined the blue line when I would watch the Blackhawks.
So you had the initiative at a very young age to kind of go for what you wanted, and what you're gonna.
Well, it has a lot to do with my father too, because my father did the same thing we did. He cleaned up pop bottles and beer bottles in 07 and 08. And
really?
Yes.
They were doing that in 07. So that was Detroit, wasn't?
Tinkers, the Evers, the Shants. Baseball was the official language at our table, kitchen table with my father. And my father used to tell us stories and pull out a name like Roger Breastahan. Do you know that he was the first catcher to use shin guards?
Did not know that.
Well, that's what my dad told me.
Oh.
Of course, years later, I'm reading about Roger Breastahan and said he was the first catcher. So my father was a baseball guru for us, and he would always compare his day to our day. And then as I got older, I would compare it to the younger people. And this is before expansion, so there was only 8 teams.
8 teams, right.
So it was easier to keep tabs of batting averages and box scores. And today I can't even tell you the names of ballparks because they keep changing the names of ballparks. I can't even tell you the names of some of the major league cities. I mean, it's gotten nuts. And of course, I remember the Brooklyn Dodgers. In fact, I was in Wrigley Field for the first game that Jackie Robinson played. My brother and I took streetcars from Albany Park, and we had to get off 4 blocks before Wrigley because the streetcars were stacked up. There was no such thing as credit cards in those days. All tickets were cash. So and there was 47,000 people at that game, and most of them bought tickets on the day of the game, and they still got come in and sat down.
And you were there. I mean, you were there. That is incredible.
There was a black couple behind us, and I remember he had a pair of binoculars, and he let me look through them, and they were real powerful field glasses. And of course, I looked for Jackie Robinson, and we always hated the Dodgers anyway. But looking back, it was the best thing in my lifetime because we wouldn't have seen all the really great players if that never happened. But it did happen. It opened the floodgates, and I shouldn't say the floodgates. There was many very well qualified black ball players. Sadly, they were already up there in age, and thus they only got a couple of years in before they retired. But it was a game changer. You know, stolen bases were unheard of.
Almost non-existent, right?
And when someone stole a base, that was wow.
Yeah.
So I got to see quite a bit, and used to listen to them on the radio on WIND. That was their home station, and Bert Wilson used to say, "Wrigley Field, the world's most beautiful ballpark," and I would agree with him because I've seen what Ebbets Field looked like, or the Polo Grounds looked like, and they didn't look like Wrigley Field, or they didn't have the vines on the wall, or the flags flying all around.
Well, wasn't Reagan a announcer? Ronald Reagan was for a while, but maybe that was a different syndicate or something.
He did ticker tape.
Oh, okay.
And I think he did it for his hometown was Dixon, Illinois.
That's right.
And I think he did it for Dixon. But ticker tape radio, which was also very interesting today because we'd be having our ear to the radio, and then if someone hit a homer, they used to have a knob that they turned the crowd noise louder so that it sounded like the fans actually are seeing a home run.
Interesting.
So we had to use our imagination with radio. And I also loved it, and I use the word love the Sox too, because I was able to see the great players from the American League. I did see DiMaggio, I did see Williams. That won't happen in most major league cities because they only have one club, most of them. So Chicago was a great place to be a baseball fan, and sadly, during the 50s, the Cubs had a shortstop by the name of Roy Smalley, which we would call him Roy Smelly. In fact, I think they used to say when it came for a double play, there would be from the shortstop Smalley to Addison Street.
And no third.
I remember once, I can't remember if it was midway through the season, and they mentioned he had 50 errors already.
Oh my gosh.
So we didn't have that much to root for.
Wow.
But then again, getting to see all the other ball players was, I never heard a boo for Stan Musial. I don't think in any of the ballparks.
They knew what they had in front of them.
So we appreciated when they came to town. and they all, the Cardinal uniform, I saw a picture once of their home uniform with the red birds on the back, and I was saying, gee, that's prettier than the Cubs.
Yeah.
But when you have a guy like Musial or Slaughter or how you call it, I mean, I was into if I paid attention to schoolwork as I did to baseball, I'd
Yeah.
probably be a nuclear scientist.
Yeah.
But I was never a good student at school. I look out the window and imagine what inning the game is in.
Yeah. So, your father would have seen Babe Ruth and that era.
Yeah. He had a lifelong friend, Lou Wadman. And Lou Wadman, grandson is Hub Arkish, who's very big with the Bears over the years. His father started a paper, Football Weekly, and was the first one to get the stats out. And so he grew up a football fan. But my father and Lou would sit on Sunday was their day to come over to our house, and they talk baseball. And of course, I listened. I didn't add anything to it. I just listened, and they had some great arguments. I happen to be Jewish, and there hasn't been that many. How would you say, Hall of Fame Jewish ball players, Sandy Koufax and Hank Greenberg, and who else? But there was a Cub catcher named John. Was it catcher or pitcher? Johnny Kling.
We know who we need. We need George Castle here now.
Huh?
We need George Castle right now at this moment.
But they used to argue, was he Jewish or not? And the reason thing, later in life, I picked up a book and they would say, there was always a big discussion whether he was Jewish or not. His kids were brought up Jewish, and he's buried in a Jewish cemetery. But there's no, so sometimes the box scores didn't have always what we wanted to know.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to think it was great when Jackie Robinson came and whatnot. I figured out you didn't have to be Jewish to root for Greenberg. You didn't have to be Italian to root for DiMaggio. Polish for New Zealand, whatever. But it is something that kids can identify with.
Right.
And if you got your heroes for the right reasons, not like Pete Rose or something anyway. But so it's always been my favorite sport. And in the 20 some odd years that I lived in San Francisco, I did go to the Candlestick Park whenever the Cubs came into town.
Okay.
And as well as when other teams came into town, and I always kept. And I don't know if you're going to be able to use this. I used to play in San Francisco.
Well, I want to kind of get that whole story, because I want to get that part of your life, and but I'd like to hear more about you grew up in Albany Park, right? And so how was your family life? How did your father and mother meet and things like that? And
Albany Park for us we were at the right time. We originally lived in Lakeview,
okay,
on Moscow Street, and we had a giant apartment that we were paying $125. My father was paying $125 for rent, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths.
That sounds like a lot.
Well, when they raised the rent $5, my father decided to talk his business partner and him to buy a duplex in Albany Park.
Good move, yeah.
So that's when we arrived in Albany Park in 1944, and it was almost a new neighborhood. It was really built for the rapid transit line.
The Brown Line.
Kimball, right.
Right.
And there tremendous amount of bungalows and single-family homes,
yes,
or duplex, and as well as for working class, they always had, I forget what they call them, the big courtyard buildings.
Sure.
So, and
it was sort of an immigrant sort of entree into,
We lived on a very mixed street.
What street was that?
It's Troy Street.
Troy, yeah. That's our first house up there was on Troy and Wilson.
Okay, well, Troy and Lawrence.
Oh, so you're just a little bit north. You're
yeah.
right. Okay.
And our best friends were Italian, and there was a good mixture, but we called it a Jewish neighborhood.
It was sort of Jewish back then.
Well, the stores, many of the stores and the restaurants were Jewish. Before the Greeks took over the restaurants, there was a lot of mom and pop's Jewish stores. Purity, delicatessen on Kimball was a very popular, and Maury Amsterdam's brother owned it.
Huh.
And Maury Amsterdam's real last name is Bernstein. But other than that, so it was a good mix. I mean, it wasn't one more than the other.
Yeah.
It was just a good mix, and never heard of any bad news. Of course, this was the war years, so from
Yeah,
so
right.
45, and then we lived there until the early 50s, and then we moved. My family moved to Florida for a short while.
Okay.
But baseball has been my pastime. You know, in the old days when my father would come home in the afternoon and bring the afternoon paper, I put it on the floor and read it spread out on the floor to read the box scores.
I was going to say the box scores.
Okay.
Everyone talks about the box scores.
Oh, box scores! You
That was
could
it.
play games in your head almost.
Mm-hmm.
In those days, I always looked for Musials to see what he did in the night before. But there was always so many great players that the Cubs didn't have. in those days.
So then you moved to Florida, and now you're in your probably mid-teens, and and so what brought you back to Chicago? How did you?
Well, we only stayed a short while. I'm a high school dropout. My attention span in school was zilch. I was never one for reading, but what I find amazing, I can answer a lot of Jeopardy questions. Not because I read it in books, but I heard it, or I've seen the newsreel of it when it happened, and somehow retained some of that. So I don't want to say I have that photographic memory, but I do have something will remind me. My brother constantly calls me to find out do you remember when something happened, and more than likely I can come up with the answer. Don't ask me to do it now, but I mean, it is really.
I think there's greater purchase now on graduating high school and college, but back then it didn't. Reading my father's and grandfather's letters from World War I and World War II, a lot of their friends didn't graduate high school, and that was.
Yeah, no, but my father was off. My father joined the Navy when he was 13. He was kicked out when he was 13 too.
Wow.
And then he joined. I got a picture somewhere when he was in the cavalry under Pershing in Texas. But my father was a genuine character. Most people are not aware of Southwater Market. It used to be a hub for all of the produce in this, let alone the city, the surrounding.
Is that like Goose Island area?
They used to bring the trucks in early in the morning and fill it up with produce so it can get back to the store. And this before the chains had stores on every block. They might have had one a mile here and a mile there, but there was more small mom and pop operations than there was Jewels and the National Tea. And but whenever you hit a working class neighborhood, that's when you found most of the large produce companies.
Is that what he did? Is that what
my father became known as the Chicago Tomato King. Here again, he knew nothing about tomatoes, but by osmosis, he learned how to sell them. He learned how to show them just right, and he used to speak a little bit of everybody's language. So no one knew what he was, but they always thought he was one of them.
Huh. Wow. It was an autodactic or something they call those folks that can pick up You know,
Well,
he picks it up and...
I know. I'm I'm a salesman because of my father, and I won't go into details, but I got some stories about things I sold to people that no one would believe, but I'll take a lie just to prove it. But I could probably sell you Manhattan, but who wants it now?
So, okay, so you come back to Chicago with your family at some point.
In the 50s.
In the 50s, okay. And then now you're in Lakeview. Are you in Lakeview at this point?
We, in the 50, no, when we were 50, in 57 we moved to, it was the first new building on Lakeshore Drive, right at Irving Park, 3950 Lakeshore Drive.
Oh, yeah, right, okay.
Interesting story about that is that it was a big complex,
Mm-hmm.
and we had a two-bed. My mother and father and my brother and I were the only ones at home at the time, and I think our rent was like $180 a month.
Mm-hmm.
They had three-bedroom apartments for $240, and they couldn't rent them. They had a wall off,
Jeez.
all one bedrooms, all the way down, and rent them as two bedrooms rather than three bedrooms. You could rent them.
Interesting.
But
So that was in the, because I worked at 3450, and those buildings were built in the 60s, in the mid-60s.
yeah, it started in the late 50s when they first started building.
Yeah.
There was no building during the war years. In fact, there were several skeletons of buildings along Lakeshore Drive where they started building them, but
Really?
during the war they couldn't complete them because for the war effort they needed the
Oh,
steel.
man.
And then only after the war did they finish those buildings.
Huh.
So, and some of them we considered modern. Today, if you looked at them, you'd think it was from the 1800s. But
Sure. And what is your mom doing all this time? Is your mother, is she, and you have siblings?
My mother, more than likely 3 nights a week you can find her playing bingo. And she didn't care who she gave her money to, whether it was the Catholic Church, whether it was Knights of Columbus or whatever. If there was a bingo hall nearby, she loved it.
Fun, yeah.
But she also became grandparents when my 2 sisters got married.
Oh, nice.
And my older brother got married. And my brother and I were with our family up until I got my first apartment in about 1957.
Oh, okay. Wow, that's great. So then you're on your own then. You're on your own in 57. That's pretty young. You're fairly
Well,
young.
If I can tell you one quick story, it has nothing to
Sure.
do with baseball, but I have to pick a year. It was 1954, 1955, and I was looking for a job, and like I said, I quit high school, and noticed there was a job available at Sears for sign makers, not like the ones that we made,
Uh-huh.
but they needed sign makers, so I thought I could go there, and I filled out the application, and they found a mistake I made. And that job was paying $3 an hour.
That's a lot.
That was $2 more than minimum wage.
Huh.
So I walked over to Marshall Field. This is 1955.
You're 18 years old now, right?
Right.
Around 18, okay.
And I went up on the 9th floor at Marshall Field, and it wasn't any, it was like summertime, but not Christmas time, and they were very busy. And I remember asking, do they need any salespeople or anything? To talk to the buyer. So they sent me into the office, gave me an application to fill out. I made sure I spelled everything right, and I handed it. And this is the Yiddish word for truth is emes. This is on the emes. I hand it to him, and he looks it over, and he says, "You've got 3 strikes against you." He says, "You're a high school dropout. You don't have any experience, and you're Jewish."
Oh my gosh.
He says, "However, I'll tell you what, I'll give you a couple of weeks trial if you would like to try it." I went home and talked to my mother. And my mother says, "You take that job." She sold hats on Milwaukee Avenue in the 20s on commission and made a good living.
Huh?
She said, you can make a good living on commission. Try it.
Good for her. Wow.
So the first week I was there, I made $50, which was a little more than minimum wage. And the second week I made $50. And on the first day of the third week I made $300 in one day.
So you're selling. You're on the floor.
Electrical appliances, which included fans. Chicago had a heat wave. Not all buildings had air conditioners back there. So everybody was buying fans.
Oh my goodness.
And that was a year that there must have been about 10 different heat waves. And I was making so much money. You could not believe how much money. I mean, literally. And they paid you in cash.
Oh my gosh.
And I could make $300, $400 a week as an 18-year-old kid on my first really job.
That was probably 55, right? Or
55 to
because
57.
that's the year my parents were married, and I remember the awful story of it was probably 108 degrees on their wedding day or some crazy temperature.
Every once in a while, I get a kick when they show on the weather the hottest day of the year, and they'll mark 1955.
Oh, wow.
And I would say, gee, I remember 1955. The only bad problem about that is that one of my uncles, who was a gambler, kept borrowing money.
Oh, you sure?
And finally I said to him, do me a favor, give me about $25 a week payback. And his wife found the checks and said to my sister, what am I doing borrowing money from my uncle?
Yeah.
And my sister comes to me and says, what are you borrowing money from him? Borrow money from me. And I started laughing. She said, what is that? He was borrowing money from me to go on a horse.
Taking it from his nephew, right?
So I had really interesting situations. I was one of the first, what they call 6-month wonders in the Army. My brother and I, we went in '57 for 6 months. That way we didn't have to worry about being drafted. And this is before the Vietnam War.
That was around the tail end of Korean War, right?
Just after Korea.
Just after?
And just before Vietnam.
Huh.
And it was interesting times. The best thing that ever happened to me, other than the Cubs, was moving to San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
I happened to be at the right time and the right place for things to happen. I found by osmosis I got involved in rights movements. Harvey Milk was a friend of mine.
Yeah.
That photo of Harvey is probably the best known photo of Harvey, other than the one they made a stamp out of. And the mayor.
Moscone, right?
That's Mayor Moscone.
Yeah.
I got a picture somewhere from here where he signed it. I took a picture of him wearing one of my T-shirts. I used to design T-shirts, and he said to Jerry from his favorite model, Mayor Moscone. I knew Nancy Pelosi. It's amazing. I don't know if you saw this picture where you came in, but take a quick peek.
Oh, I wanted to mention that. I mean, that's incredible.
That's my photo he's holding, and that's my photo of him. And that picture was made for him to stand and use my words, but I won't go into detail.
Yeah, I'd like to get a long shot of this, because that's quite an impressive piece you have there. So you moved to San Francisco in your early 20s then, right?
I was 26, I think,
26.
When I got there in '64. I got there in '60 and then in '64. I was a jewelry salesman. I became a publicist by, don't ask me how, but I placed people on the Carson Show. I placed people on Donahue and the Today Show. I made some people famous. Some people don't want to admit that now. I've had a gem of a life. I mean, it's not only baseball, but baseball, like I said, was my pastime. In fact, and now bragging rights or whatever, when I got to San Francisco. If you grew up in Chicago, you grew up with 16-inch softball. Well, in San Francisco, they played a 12-inch softball. And I joined the first gay softball league in the country. And it started out with 6 teams. By the time, first year we had 19 teams. Our league was so great that many straights wanted to play in our league, and we let them play in our league. It wasn't. Some guys protested saying that they didn't get a chance to play. Well, when you want to win, you use your best players. And I knew nothing about 12-inch softball. In fact, I started out as a third baseman until we got this guy on our team who turned out to be the MVP of the league that year.
That's a tough position,
and my friend who was the manager taught me, boys, to pitch batting practice. And I started pitching batting practice. Well, I want you to know, I learned to throw a knuckleball. And Glenn, you heard of Glenn Burke? He played for the Dodgers, the first openly gay ball player.
Okay.
Well, I struck him out on my knuckleball.
Whoa.
It really danced in the wind.
Now this is 12-inch or
12-inch
12-inch,
softball.
okay.
In 1978, in 2 games alone, the opening day game where I got Mary Moscone to throw out the first ball at a gay softball team, so far ahead than anybody else. There was only 2,000 people in the stands. Later that year, we used to play the police league, and because my team won the champion, we played the police team. Only 8,000 people.
Oh, God.
And here's bragging rights. I don't know if you want them or not.
Yeah.
I actually retired 9 cops in a row, 7 on 7 pitches,
Gee.
and shut them out in front of 8,000 people.
Huh.
And I love the opportunity that I didn't play school ball. I didn't play high school ball or whatever.
Fantastic.
I was a 38-year-old rookie.
That's and you were on a championship team, leading your team. That's incredible.
Not only that, I was writing for the gay newspapers, the sports section, and I made it look like it was a regular newspapers with box scores and.
Yeah, because you knew the game and you knew how it should be represented. You know, I've heard you've referred to yourself as the gay Forrest Gump.
Oh yes.
But I think you're not giving yourself credit. Forrest Gump was sort of just fell into situations.
Yeah,
you kind of created your own.
But he did meet with presidents.
Right, but you sort of created your situation. You know, you get more credit, I think.
Yeah, no, but it is a fact. Nancy Pelosi. I mean, I can name them off. And the governor's mother.
Daley?
Pritzker, Sue Pritzker. Was managing Senator Tunney's campaign, got me involved. It's on and on and on. It's like one thing leads to another, and the one thing, and this is, money has never been my. I've had the pleasure of quitting jobs because they did something wrong, and I refused to work there.
And you have ethics and morals.
I had one employer who said he would never hire anybody back that quit on him. I quit on him 3 times.
Yeah. Well, you made him his words.
I really became a good salesman.
Yeah.
And I learned at Marshall Field, you better tell the truth. Because I remember I was in the small appliances. I was selling a coffee maker to a little old lady, and I wanted to make a sale. I said, my sister has one just like this, and she loves it, but she didn't buy it. But 2 weeks later, she came back and said, I'll have a coffee maker like your sister. I said, which sister? But I learned from that. I've had a storybook life, and I wouldn't change my mistakes. I wouldn't change everything.
Good.
I really, I remember once on a Sunday afternoon I played the softball, and it was a warm day, and I was sweaty, and I got home, and I turned on the tube and turned on myself, and I'm looking at the tube, and there seems to be a set that looks like Wrigley Field. I had no idea what it was, but I found myself sitting in front of it, and for the next hour or so, it was the beginning of the play Bleacher Bumps.
Hmm.
I had no idea. I never heard of the play Bleacher Bumps up until that point, but I watched it and I cheered it, and I really had a good time by myself. I might as well have been in the bleachers.
Yeah.
I really was enjoying it.
Sure.
The very next day, I used to read want ads for jobs I didn't want, and there was an ad for actors for the play Bleacher Bumps in San Francisco.
Oh my gosh.
And I called the guy up, who was the director, and I said, listen, I'm not an actor, I'm not after any act. I said, but I am really a Cub nut. I watched the Cubs go on the air with Jack Rithouse, blah, 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 blah. I think I know a lot of Chicagoans in San Francisco. I think I can help your play as a publicist. He said, come on down, and he hired me. The Bill Veck and Me came out.
Yeah.
There was a 99 theater. It was the year of a baseball strike, and there was no other games in town. So I called the sports department and have their reporters come and do stories on our cast and on play. And you can always tell in the play who was from Chicago, because near the end, when they brought Ernie Banks out of retirement, the theater would clap, and you know that they had to be Cub fans. So it was doing so well that they had to move to a 350 seat theater.
Holy cow.
And I continued to Bill Veck. I had Butterfingers became the Cubs' official candy bar. We had Andy Frain ushers in our lobby with the uniforms that I got from Andy Frain.
Oh, jeez.
The street signs that are in the other room, I got them from the city.
Oh, yeah.
The yellow street signs. I turned the lobby into Wrigley Field West. I happened to be in Chicago while the show was down, and I went into the Tribune Tower, and they had a display in their little theater of 35 years of the Cubs dropping the ball. This is before they owned the team. And I said, what are you going to do with this when you're through with it? And the guy says, why? I said, I'm involved with the play Bleacher Bumps. I got a great lobby. I would love to put it in. He said, give me the address. He sent it to the lobby. It became such a fun part of, before people would go into the play or during the intermission, they would look at it. I remember there's one picture of Sally Drake where he's posing to catch a ball. He made an error. But it's just one thing led to another. I mean, it was just mushroom. And then I began to record the Bay Area resident Cub fan. When people would write about the play, they would mention my early years cleaning up the ballpark and the play. And it was 1981. The play was going to be closing after a year and a half. And I read where Jack Brickhouse was coming to Candlestick Park for the last time as the Cubs announcer.
Wow.
So I went to the Giants. I said, "Are you planning anything for Brickhouse?"
So at this point, the Giants probably know you in some capacity in terms of
but not,
the play.
Not really. Oh, that's not true. Lurie came to the play. McCovey came to the play.
Okay.
Mike Krukow came to the play. I had a lot of
Yeah.
Yes.
So you could name drop and.
But when I came to the Giants, I asked them what they're going to do, and they said, "Why would we do anything for Jack Brickhouse?" I said, "Have you ever noticed when the Cubs here that there's as many Cub hats as there are Giants hats?" He said, "What do you want to do?"
Even back then, yeah.
So I created a Hey Hey Award and presented it at Jack Brickhouse, handled a mic in front of 11,000 people.
Oh my goodness, that's
and
a great
Jack
story.
appreciated it because I told him
Sure.
I saw the first game go that he announced for the Cubs. And then I told him something that he said, "You're the only person who remembers this." I said, 2 weeks before the station went on the air, they did an experimental program from the amphitheater of the Golden Glove fights, and he was doing the announcing. And he was shocked that someone saw that, because in those days no one had TVs, and we had a TV. So all these things, one thing led to another. But here again, now you'll know why I call myself Forrest Gump. I just made things happen. I always had a great imagination. I found that on many historic of my photographs, I happened to be stoned. And the only reason I saw what I saw was because I was stoned. And so I never hid the fact. I even turned my 76-year-old mother on once, and the first time she lit up, she took a couple of hits. She says, "Can you buy these by the carton?" I've had a fun life.
Sure.
And like I say, when I first started showing up at Wrigley, most of the people didn't know who the heck I was, why the cameras were coming to me, and so forth and so on. Over a period of time.
So let's get into that phase. Now this would be your bleacher preacher era, right?
Right. Originally, I called myself the bleacher creature.
Okay.
Until a Detroit Tiger fan came up to me and said, "Are you aware that there's a whole section 39 at it may have been Tiger Stadium or Briggs Stadium, I can't remember what they called it at the time, that is called the Bleacher Creatures." So that night I went back home, went to the kitchen, lit up a joint. See what I'm trying to tell you? I lit up a joint.
It's always there.
And I'm coming up, bleacher teacher, bleacher preacher, bleacher preacher.
That's it.
My 10 commandments, blah, 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 conversions, and one thing led to another, and even Harry Carey said I was the #1 Cub fan.
So this was 81, 82 when you're back. Is this when you're back here in the bleachers? Was that 1981, 82?
No, I came back in for the 1984 season.
Okay.
And here's a very funny thing. The Cubs opened up in San Francisco that year. I got Harry Carey and Dallas Green to come into the store that I was pitching at that time, called the Locker Room. It was a sports store. And I had that display that I had up from the play in the windows, and they were amazed to see all this Cubs stuff in a San Francisco window. And that's when I started to know Dallas and Harry. And
so they're together, and you're chatting it up with the two of them in San Francisco.
In San Francisco. And like I say, they opened up. What was interesting, the Cubs had a publicist, Bob Ibeck, and I wrote him, "Since you're opening up, I'm touting a restaurant on Pier 39. Can you bring some Cub players from the opener?" He said, "How many can I bring?" I said, "Well, bring whatever you can bring." And he brought 4 players. And one of them, when I looked at him, I have conversations with myself. And I remember looking at this guy and saying, "This is a ball player?" It was Von Sandberg.
He was a rookie, wasn't he, that year? Right.
Larry Bowe was with him, a couple of other players, and they enjoyed their dinner and so forth. And afterwards I sat down with them, and they told me that the ashes of Charlie Grimm was going to be spread over the Wrigley Field very shortly.
The players knew that?
Bob Ibeck was there.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So I got a scoop for the San Francisco newspaper saying that Charlie Grimm's ashes are going to be, and I got scoops in newspapers.
Yeah.
And it was one thing, never made this, but I didn't care.
Right.
I was just enjoying myself. In fact, in one day in San Francisco, I walked into 3 jewelry stores in one day and sold in 3 different stores while wearing Levi's jewelry, high-fashion jewelry.
Well, if your focus was on making money, you wouldn't have had all these experiences. It just wouldn't have happened.
The people I know with money were not happy.
and I'm not saying I was happy all the time,
Right.
but I liked eating in mom and pop stores. I didn't like eating in fancy restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
It never was me. I never was one for a tie, whether in the bleacher or
Mhm.
elsewhere. So I was my own. I named my prices when I had a good reputation as a salesman.
Sure.
And one thing always led to another. And at Christmas time, they used to pay me good because I would make good sales. And then they laid me off, and I got my unemployment for 39
Yeah,
weeks.
right.
And one thing more to brag about.
It's like construction work.
I was
they do.
in San Francisco. I was renting a house, front yard, backyard, 2 garages, and had what they call an in-law apartment, a small apartment that used to be for a maid or whoever. And I was paying $250 for this house, and I lived there for 8 years. I rented the garages out because I didn't have a car.
Mm-hmm.
And I rented the in-law out, and my nut was $100 a month for 8 years. That house sold in the 80s for $3 million.
Oh my goodness.
And I lived there for $100 a month for 8 years. This is the kind of
Yeah.
accidental life I had. And that's not the best thing that ever happened to me, apartment-wise.
Right.
I always stumbled into things.
Mm-hmm.
It's when you don't plan something, that's when things happen.
Exactly.
And so I've always had, people always thought I was wealthy because I always had great apartments or houses or whatever. And how hard did you have to work to make $100 a month?
Mm-hmm.
And a little pot in those days was only $7.
Yeah, but now it's legal. That's the you don't have to. But back then in that area, that was probably commonplace, right? It was probably not.
It was a fun time to be.
Yeah.
I mentioned I got to see the Grateful Dead
Yeah.
in a gay bar. No cover, 25-cent beer.
Good
in a bottle.
gosh.
The concerts in those days, they didn't have tier prices. They had one price for the Oakland
Mhm.
Coliseum,
Yeah.
$8 for everybody. That's how it should be.
Yeah. So then you start going. You start going to the bleachers. You're in the bleachers in '84.
In '84, what happened? The Cubs opened up in San Francisco. I was able to get the few players to come to the restaurant afterwards, and it seemed like once the season opened, the Cubs were winning, and the second half of the season, the All-Star game was in San Francisco. The Democratic convention was in San Francisco, and I created a Dallas Green for President campaign. I got 30 delegates from Illinois that were Green for President into the national convention. It made the wires and made the things.
Sure.
I got a letter from Dallas Green saying that's not my forte. The Cubs, blah blah blah. Thank you very much, blah blah. Blah. So what happened when they opened up in the second half of the season? The Cubs were the first team back. After opening up in San Francisco, they were also opening the second half with San Francisco.
With San Francisco at home.
And I created a little sign at that time that said, "How do you spell believe?" C-U-B-S. I made brass luggage tags for them, and I used to get to the candlestick early, especially when the Cubs were there. And Steve Stone, at that time, I think was doing NBC broadcasting.
Oh,
and
yeah.
he was getting ready to do his bit, and I said, "Hey, Steve, I got something for you." And he looks at it, "How do you spell believe?" And he opens up his program. National, how do you spell believe?
Ah!
Right, yeah. Then I started the Dallas Green for President. That got in Sports Illustrated. I mean,
So you started kind of doing your thing the second half of '84 when they were
Right.
starting to roll.
So I decided I was going to spend the last month in the bleachers at Wrigley. And the first day I came out with my voodoo doll out there. It made Frank Matthew on Channel 7. It made the AP wire services. I couldn't strike out. And it seems like everything I did, it was amazing. The media was paying attention. But that's when I started sitting into the bleachers, and some of the people was questioning, who am I, what am I? But once I had a chance to talk to them and tell them that they go back to 45 and things like that, then they realized, yes, I am a Cub fan. You know? But so the last part of the season, it looked like the Cubs were going, and they won the first 2 games of the playoffs.
Right.
In fact,
San Diego.
there was a radio station here called WMET for a while. I had an agreement with them that if the Cubs get into the World Series, I was going to have a call-in voodoo show. If they weren't ready for it, and the Cubs win the first 2, all I have to win is one more.
Right.
And it never happened.
Jeez.
But what happened, strangely, that was a year the 49ers also got hot. So everything I planned to do was for the Cubs, I did for the 49ers in San Francisco. And here again, I was getting the media attention. A call-in voodoo show mentioned in USA Today. You know, this was all planned for the Cubs, but the Cubs didn't plan it right. But, so it was '84, and then I decided in '80. I came in '85 because when I was on Harry Carey's 10th inning show. It was in '85.
It was '85.
Right, and I was at the game, and he said, "Stick around. I want to talk to you after the game." I said, He said, "Yes, on the 10th inning." So that was.
So he got you in the booth after the game.
And the pride that I took, and that he introduced me as John Q. Public, the fan. So I had all these things just fall in my lap.
Sure.
The things when I planned things, they didn't happen. But if I started things out, they would happen by osmosis.
Yeah.
So one thing led to the other, and like I said, originally when I started calling myself the Bleacher Creature, I had to change myself to the Bleacher Creature. That turned out to be the best thing that ever happened.
Our paths crossed in '89 when we started doing our little sign, the Shawnometer, and we were always sort of at the middle. Sometimes we probably sat in the same section, I would think. Or you know, we were sort of in the middle, towards the front of left field bleachers, and you were always at the top, and you were with Carmelo, I believe, right? How did that relationship? That seems like that
was the best thing. That was truly the best thing that happened to me in the bleachers was Carmelo. I remember someone said, "This woman here she was 88 at the time, and she lived to be 102, I believe."
Yeah, amazing.
And said, "This woman's in her 60s, so forth and so on." And I started talking to her, and I said, "Sit down," and she had the most fascinating stories to tell. She grew up in Chicago. She worked in those candy factories like Lucille Ball on the running thing, and she would tell stories about during the heat waves they couldn't make candy because it was melting. They didn't have air conditioning. And I just enjoyed it. It wasn't a baseball thing. It was really a life thing. And I remember the first day it looked like it was going to rain. I was using my brother's car. I said, "Can I give you the lift home?" She said, "No, I'll take a bus."
Now this is at the ballpark.
Right.
So she was a Cub fan to begin with.
She started when she retired. She used to clean at the merchandise mart for the canteen company. And when she retired, she started to come out to the ballpark because when her kids were younger, they used to go with her husband to the ballpark every so often. And she decided she was going to go to the ballpark. She took 2 buses to get to the ballpark and 2 buses back, and at one time she went 7 years without missing a game.
Oh my goodness.
So, but when I started being with her, I really was enjoying hearing the stories
Sure.
that she had to say, and she was a fascinating lady, and like I say, the best thing that happened to me, truly,
Yeah.
I was blessed. It was like having another mother, and
Yeah.
through me, she started becoming the matriarch in the bleachers. People used to bring their children to be blessed
Yeah.
by her. But Carmela was truly a great lady, and
I remember seeing something with her throwing out the first pitch or something. Was that? Did
oh,
you
yeah,
have something
she-
to do with that as well?
The funny thing about that is, I took her to Wells Park to teach her how to throw underhand, and we used a tennis ball, and got her to really do it. She threw a strike.
Good for her.
and the funny thing about it was, Sammy Sosa was on the sideline, and he's going like this to her, and she says this. And Sammy Sosa had to come over to her, and I got a friend of mine who used to be a light photographer, took a collection of pictures of her with Sammy, and that whole thing is caught on tape.
Fantastic.
So, but Carmela, truly, you didn't have to be a baseball fan to enjoy Wrigley Field. It was out in the open, and in those days, even if you wanted to spread out, you could spread out and lie down on, because the crowds weren't that big. But and every once in a while, someone would light up a joint.
Yep.
And Carmela used to say, "Someone's burning their garbage." So, Carmela it really was a blessing. That was the uniqueness of the fans. It didn't end when the game was over. Some of them would go to a bar. Some of them would just sit out by the ballpark and talk. We were all human. You
Yeah.
know? And if the Cubs lost, it wasn't like the end of the world. We've been there before.
Right.
But it just by just being near Wrigley, you felt safe. You felt it just was good times.
Yeah. What were some of your favorite memories of that era? Because you were in the bleachers from '84 till.
There was 2 really great era things that happened. There was a pitcher for the I believe he was with the Mets at the time, Roger McDowell.
McDowell, sure.
And Roger always had a good time when he came to Wrigley Field, and he would throw baseballs up and play catch, and in my case, plays frisbees.
He did the hose, the fire hose. Remember?
No, right.
He did. Yeah.
I gave him the Gunga Din Award for that, and we became. And I remember the first time he saw me, and he said, "Hey, I saw you on CNN yesterday."
Oh,
and
fun.
started a conversation.
That's crazy, and
But-
he's the opposing team, and he's
But
yeah.
one time it was interesting. I had a streak of 87 straight games. I
Huh.
did not miss a game that year.
That beats mine.
And Roger McDowell was coming. I can't remember if he was with the Braves then or so he always used to say, "Bring your frisbee," because they would be playing frisbee. Well, it was raining, and it looked like there might be a rain delay or whatever. But he came running out from the dugout and said, "Did you bring your frisbee?" I said, "Yes." I started getting, and there was an usher behind me. And the usher says, "If you throw that,
Oh, gee.
you're out of the ballpark." And I said, "Look." And he looked, and I threw it, and he kicked me out of the ballpark.
He did.
Yeah, but I didn't mind because I caught up Ellis Green. He says, "Go down in the office. I'll try and meet you down there."
This is the same game?
Huh?
This is during that game?
No, they did play a game,
But you-
they kicked me out before the game.
Right, okay.
And I sat around the ballpark moping,
Mm.
and it turns out
Dallas Green, you
that
gave.
he wasn't able to get me back into the ballpark. He said, I don't want to start anything with our...
Sure,
but,
sure.
He says, so to make a long story short, I took up the phone and I called Sports Illustrated. And I said, hey, my streak came in. And so what happened? I said, I was playing Frisbee with Osmond. Well, they drew a cartoon of thing, and over my picture they said defrocked.
Ah!
And I said, I'm now becoming a free agent fan. And I made something out of it.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
But one thing about Roger McDowell, sometimes he would take a barrel out and put a jacket, a team jacket in there, a baseball sign, even, I don't know how big the bill was, but it was a fresh bill, and he gave people who throw a ball, and the first one to get it would bring everything in it. But a few years back, not that long ago, he had a problem in San Francisco, and that lawyer who I can't think of her name anyway. She was making a big to-do out of Roger McDowell. She claimed that he made gestures on the bat in front of kids.
Oh, come on.
And then she recreated the gesture in front of the kids with the bat. But make a long story short, I called. He was with Atlanta then, because I called the Constitution up and said, Roger McDowell is one of the best things to happen to baseball. I know Roger McDowell. I'm openly gay. We have great times playing Frisbee.
Oh, yeah.
And to say he's anti-gay is malarkey. And they voted in the Constitution. And the next time I see him, he thanked me.
Jeez, what a story.
There have been a few ball players like that who really stood out.
You've got your birthday's coming up. A big 85.
I hit 85 and not homers.
Good for
It's hard to believe. You know, I did play softball until about 10 years ago.
Good for you.
But I never could think of myself at the age I was ever. And my mother, I know that she used to always hang around with my sister's girlfriends, and it made her feel young, and they wanted her there because they made everybody feel good about it. And so I've always enjoyed, whether it's baseball crowds or I got involved in politics. I've been involved in politics. It's amazing.
Well,
I haven't given up. I'm sure there's another story waiting for me to happen.
there is.
Maybe it's
I
just
guarantee.
been getting on the
I
tube.
guarantee. Well, Jerry, this has been a real pleasure to sit down with you and talk
but
about.
You mentioned something about right field sucks.
Yeah, that's what we're calling this.
Did you know that center field inhales?
I think that'll be our denouement for this. Brilliant. Thanks, Jerry.